All right, hey class.
So this is our last, excuse me, our last set of notes for Unit 3. So the next video you see will be our Unit 3 test review. Up until this point, we have learned how to solve an equation that has two variables, an x and a y. But now we're going to start learning how to solve equations, actually not equations, but a system of equations, meaning it has two equations. But you already know everything you need to know to solve two equations. We just have to put it into practice. Okay, so this first section, systems of two linear equations. So we're talking about linear equations. A system means that there are two equations with two variables. So it's two equations, two variables, or an x and a y each. So they two equations and they both have x's and y's. The a, b, and c would be numbers and the d, e, and f would be numbers, but they both have x's and y's. So a solution of a system is an ordered pair. Or you can think of that as an x and a y that makes both equations true. So we have to have an x and a y. Look at this next one. We have to have an x and a y that's going to make both equations true. So here are my two equations. Basically it's saying I should be able to plug 1 into x and 4 into y and it make that equation true. And then I should be able to plug 1 into x of the second equation, 4 into y of the second equation, and it should make that equation true. Let's see if this one, we're going to check to see if this one makes this first equation true. So I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to plug it into that x. So remember, I'm going to use parentheses. I'm going to take that 4 and I'm going to plug it into that y. And then it's still going to equal -5. So if you notice, the only thing that happens, I took my x, turned it into a parentheses, turned my y into parentheses, and then I put 1 in for x and 4 in for y. So now let's punch this left-hand side into my calculator and see if it equals -5. Ooh, let me clear that. And it does not. It equals -11. -11 does not equal -5, so this is not a solution. Now, if this would have made this equation true, then I would have had to plug it into the next one to make sure to see if it made that one true. All right, so now we're going to check to see if -5, 0 makes both of these equations true. So remember, the only thing that's going to change, I'm going to take my x and turn it into parentheses, take my y into parentheses. I'm going to plug -5 in for my x. I'm going to plug 0 in for my y. I'm not going to punch this one in the calculator because look what happens. Well, -3 times 0 is 0. So that leaves me with -5 equals -5 because -5 minus 0 equals -5. So that one works. But that doesn't guarantee me that that is the solution for both equations. Now I'm going to plug it into the next one. There's my equation rewritten with parentheses. I'm going to take my x, plug it into my x parentheses. I'm going to take my 0, plug it into that one. So -2. So now I'm going to go ahead, this one, I'm going to punch this whole thing, that left-hand side, into my calculator. And that gives me 10. So does 10 equal 10? It does. So this one is, it is a solution. Remember, it had to be a solution for both of the equations for it to become a solution for the system of equations. So now, how do we solve a system of equations by graphing? Excuse me. So now I'm going to be given two equations. I'm going to graph them, and then we're going to figure out if it's a solution by graphing them. So how do we do that? Graph each equation on the XY coordinate plane. If the lines intersect, so that's the math term, if the lines intersect, all that means is if they cross, the point or the ordered pair where the lines intersect is the solution. So basically, we're going to graph one line. If those lines intersect or if they touch anywhere, that point right there would be the solution. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph. We have 4 of them to do. If you'll notice, this one's already in slope-intercept form. My y's are already by themselves. So we're going to go ahead and figure out what the slope, remember m equals slope, and what the y-intercept equals. Remember, the m always comes from in front of the x, not the x, but in front of the x. And the b, or the y-intercept, is always the constant, or the number without a letter in front, or a letter behind it. So remember, b is my starting point, so my starting point is going to be at -12. I'm going to go ahead and put a point at -12 on the y-axis. And then my slope tells me my rise over run. Well, in this case, it's 3, so it's really 3 over 1. So that tells me to go +3, which in math that means up, and then 1 to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 1 to the right. Again, I'm going to go up 3 from my new point, 1, 2, 3, 1 to the right. From my new point, I'm going to go up 3 and 1 to the right. 1 to the right. I should really have a ruler to graph this line, but I do not, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use this pencil right here. I'm not in my office, so I don't have my ruler with me. When you graph this, make it go all the way across the graph. Don't make it a little short line. Use your points, use your rise over run, go all the way across the graph till you run out of room, till you run out of the graph, and make your line go all the way across the graph. Because remember, we're looking for where these two lines cross. If you do a little short line, they might cross up here, but you'd never see it. Okay, so now let's talk about my second equation. It again is in slope-intercept form. My y is by itself. So I'm ready to graph this one. So I need to find out what my m is and what my b is. Remember, my b is my starting point, or the number that's without a letter, so that's 3. I'm going to go to 3, wish I had a different color, not a big deal. I'm going to go to 3 on the y-axis and put a point. Remember, my starting point is always on the y-axis. Next, I'm going to look for my m. It's the number in front of the x, so it's -2, but remember, that is really -2 over 1. We want it to be a fraction. We want to be able to see that rise over run, excuse me. So this tells me to go down 2 because it's negative, and then to the right 1. Down 2, to the right 1. Down 2, and to the right 1. And keep going, even though now I know where it's going to cross. Get in the habit of making these lines go all the way across your graph. I would normally turn my paper to do this, but I don't want to mess up the camera angle. All right, so if you notice, my line down here is a little bit off my points, but the most important point on this is that one right there. That is my solution. In this one, my x would be 3, right? My point is right below 3 on my x-axis. And then my y is straight across from -3. So what that means is, if I took 3 and plugged it into x, and I took negative 3 and plugged it into y, this statement would become true. If I took 3 and plugged it into that x, and negative 3 and plugged it into that y, this statement would be true. This is a solution for both, or this system of equations. All right, so let's do the next one. Again, my y is already by itself, so I'm ready to graph. On this first one, we need to find our m. We need to find our b. Let's do our b first. Our b is our constant, negative 2. My starting point on my y, go to negative 2 on the y-axis, put a point. Let's find out what my slope is, or my m. Well, I don't see a number, I just see a negative. So that is really negative 1. What that really equals is negative 1 over 1. Always make your bottom number positive. If it's a negative in front of it, put the negative with the top number, not the bottom number. Okay, so here's my starting point at negative 2. My rise over run is down 1 to the right 1. Down 1 to the right 1. So I'm going to go down 1 to the right 1. Down 1 to the right 1. Down 1 to the right 1. Keep doing that. But if you'll notice, I don't have any points up here. Well, what you're going to get good at realizing is if I go down 1 into the right 1, well, if I go up 1 into the left 1, doesn't that still put me on that line? Yes, it does. So I can keep going up 1 into the left 1. Up 1 to the left 1. So down 1 to the right 1 is the same as up 1 to the left 1. Just keep doing that. We're going to do it all the way across. And then graph your line. I'm a little bit off, but that's all right. All right, so let's do our second line. Because at the end of this school year, you will be really, really good at graphing lines, I promise you. We're going to do a bunch of them. So let's find my b. Remember, that's my constant, or the number without a letter. That's my starting point. Let's go ahead and go to 3 on the y-axis and put a point. My rise over run, or my slope, is 2 over 3. Well, it's already a fraction, which is good. That's what we want. 2 tells me to go up 2. 3 tells me to go to the right 3. Up 2 to the right 3. So there's my graph on that side. But if you notice, I don't have any points over here. Well, going up 2 and to the right 3 is the same thing as going down 2 and to the left 3. Down 2 and to the left 3. And now I'm finished. Let's graph it all the way across. And use a ruler or a straight edge. I'll give you a straight edge in class to help you graph if you don't have a ruler. Now remember, we're looking for where these two lines cross. It looks like it's right there. We need to find out what the x value of that point is. Well, it's right above negative 3 on the x-axis. Now let's see, it's right across from positive 1 on the y-axis. So there's my solution. Put those in parentheses when you give me your answer. All right, 2 more. Another one that's already done for you, or already put in slope-intercept form. So we're going to find the rise over run and the starting point, or the y-intercept of this one. My y-intercept is the constant, so it's 4. Go to 4, put a point. I don't see a number in front of it, so it's really 1, but remember, we want it to look like a fraction, so we're going to put 1 over 1. So that tells me up 1 to the right 1. Up 1 to the right 1. Remember that I need some points over here. So up 1 to the right 1 is the same thing as down 1 to the left 1. And graph your line. Let's find our slope and our starting point, or our y-intercept on the second one. So 2 is my constant, that's my b. I see a negative in front of the x, so that's really negative 1, but go ahead and put it over a positive 1. So it tells me to go to my starting point at 2 on the b-axis, or on the y-axis, excuse me. And from there, I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 1, down 1 to the right 1, down 1 to the right 1. Let's stop right there. If you notice, I'm going away from my other line. So that means I'm going to have to do points on the other side of my graph. So remember, down 1 to the right 1 is the same thing as up 1 to the left 1. Biggest thing is when you go the other direction, make sure your points would still fall on the line that you're trying to graph. And this one does. So it's going to be hard because I'm at a bad angle. There's my line. That's where they cross. Let's find out what our x and y values are of that point. So it's right above the -1 on the x-axis. And then it's right across from 1, 2, 3 on the y-axis. So my solution is -1, 3. Again, if I plug -1 into x and 3 into y, it would make that statement true. We'll do some of those in class. We'll check them in class. If I take 3 and plug it into y and -1 into x on this one, it's going to make that statement true. All right, last one. If you notice though, my y is not by itself. So the first thing I have to do is get the y by itself. So if I've got x minus y equals 5, I need to move this x to the other side. I'm going to take that x and move it over. But remember, when I do that, it has to change signs. A +5 stays the same. My y is still not by itself. It has a negative in front of it. So I need to divide everything by -1. And what happens is my y turns positive, which is what I wanted. My negative x turns into positive x. And my 5 divided by -1 turns into a -5. So now, let's do my m and my b for this line right here. My b is -5. It's the number without a letter. Go to -5, put a point. My m, there's no number in front of the x, so it's really a 1. Go ahead and put it over 1. That tells me my slope is up 1 to the right 1. Go ahead and finish it going down 1 to the left 1. There's my first line. Let's look at the second one. Again, the y is not by itself, so we've got to get y by itself. I'm going to take this positive 2x and move it to the other side. I'm going to move it to the other side, and when that happens, it becomes -2x plus 10. Next, I'm going to divide by 2. Everything, that gives me y, because these 2's cancel. -2 divided by +2 is going to give me a -1 x. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So on this one, my m and my b, or my b is +5, and my m is -1. Put that over a +1. So go to 5 on the y-axis, and go down 1 to the right 1, right? Down 1 to the right 1. And keep going from your new points. Down 1 to the right 1. And that gives me my answer, but I'm going to go ahead and graph or draw that line. Remember, when you do your line, go all the way across the graph. Put arrows. So there's my answer. So let's see what that is on the x-axis. Well, it's actually on 5 on the x-axis. And then my y-axis, it's even with 0 on my y-axis. So there's my solution. Again, in class, we'll check some of these to let you see that what we just graphed actually is the solution for those systems of equations.